Hi there and welcome. Steve Wills here. Thanks for joining me. In this video, we'll be looking at a few exciting new enhancements we've added to Workflow Ascendant. These include real-time delegation, as well as a few administrative tools, changing usernames, process versioning, and lastly, we'll conclude with a few things to keep in mind relative to delegation. Now, in this first scenario, looking at real-time delegation, an employee leaves, for example, on vacation, fails to create a delegation document. Happens surprisingly often. By way of reminder, we can simulate time in Workflow Ascendant. Here is where we indicate the test date. So that will be the 6th December. And now the database administrator will create a delegation document from orange to red. We'll do that for today's date. First, to show you, however, that there is a very robust and consistent error checking mechanism used throughout Workflow Ascendant. Putting that back to today's date. Now, this button is only available to the administrator, so can enact immediately the delegation, as you can see here. And whenever a delegation is enacted, an email is sent to the delegated to user with a copy to the delegating user. So now A1 will create a new document, send it into the process, add a few comments. Now, Director Red, who is filling in for Manager Orange, will come in, add his own comments, and just to show you that also the fields which are protected normally just for Manager are now also under the authority of the Director. So in this particular scenario, we want to prevent documents that are under the authority of the delegated to user being transferred to the delegating user when they shouldn't be. To demonstrate this, we'll first create a delegation document. You can see that Orange does not have the authority to create documents for other users, only the administrator does. So this delegation will be effective tomorrow. Now user A1 will create two documents. Again, we're not in the delegation period yet. So now those two documents are under Manager Orange. We'll say that Manager Orange intervenes in one of those documents. But not in the other. Now simulating time. As the DB manager, we're going to advance into the delegation period. So we'll set the date forward a couple of days. And as you can see here, now both documents are under the authority of Director Red, only one of which via delegation. So if Director Red chooses not to intervene in either document and the delegation period expires, we do not want the second document to go back to Manager Orange. Only that document that was via delegation. And once again, here is an email being sent once the delegation period has expired. In this third scenario, we'll be looking at delegation occurring when users are allocated to roles downstream in the process. So a little bit different, but a unique case. So these users will belong to the group sales, As you can see, this tab is normally hidden. We'll advance into the delegation period. As you can see here. So you can see that no users have been allocated yet to sales. So there they were via code abstraction. There are our users. So the assignments have been made. And we'll see here that the delegation occurred as expected, even though those users were allocated downstream in the process. We'll advance out of the delegation period. As you can see, those documents have been reverted back to the original users. The last scenario we'll be looking at is one where we'll be having multiple delegations, and that in the context of both inclusive and parallel operations. So just upping the complexity a little bit. Once again, we'll create a delegation document. This one from E1 to E5. And another from green to blue. And there they are. So one delegation starts on the 7th, the other on the 8th. Let's now go in as user A1. Oh, note that we can now simulate any user, database administrator. This is a great time saver when it comes to testing applications. So you can see here, these are the users that are awaiting to intervene. So we'll advance into the process. One day, we'll see that the delegation has occurred from E1 to E5. We'll advance now into the second delegation. And there, it's gone from green to blue. Let's say now we go in as E5, we'll intervene. As you'll see, it'll be removed. That user will be removed from the list. And now we'll advance out of the delegation period to show that user blue is now reverting back to user green. Changing usernames. This is where users need to be changed on a permanent basis. Perhaps they've been reassigned or transferred or left the company. So this functionality essentially falls out of the delegation functionality. When you have one, you basically have the other. So let's demonstrate how that works. So let's say we want to replace two users, both manager Orange as well as user A1, who created the document. Well, we'll first go in. We want to change the role from orange to green. Note this has nothing to do with the ACL. Now we'll change the users in the workflow documents. Of course, you select them to apply the changes. So we'll say user orange becomes user green. We'll then do the same for user A1. We'll say user A2. Now let's see how it works. We're now user manager green, new manager green. Changing the comments field again. Going back to the author, A2, which is now, well, the replacement for A1. Can now change the comments. Lastly, green going in and approving the request. Again, showing that the transfer of authority is complete. One last note, an important one for auditing purposes. Note that anyone who has intervened in the document is not modified, of course. Process versioning. It's important to remember that processes are living, breathing organisms. They change over time. And to accommodate that, we want to use a system of versioning. So first, I'd like to show you the original process. We're going to advance now into the Director Read. And just to show you that Director Read has no option to send the document back to the author for modification. That user can only archive the document. So let's create a new process. Well, we'll first use an existing process, the state documents, to create the new process. So again, we just copy and paste these documents. And we need to indicate the new version. Now you can use this mechanism to modify any fields. We'll now say this is version 2. And refresh selected documents is essentially simulating opening, saving a document. So now we'll do the same for fields. These documents are essential for delegation to take place. So whenever you have constraints, be sure to put the corresponding field document here. So again, changing it to version 2. We'll refresh those documents. Here they are. We'll now create a new reference document. This is that unique and sequential reference that we allocate to workflow documents. And now we'll make the changes. So here we want Director to be able to send the document back to the author for modification. Here's the updating the history log. Email to be sent when the document is sent back to the author. And lastly, updating the comments tab. All things we've looked at in previous videos. Now, lastly, we need to indicate to Workflow Ascendant which process version to use. So here's where we say version 02 for Doc 102. And now let's see what it looks like. So this will be a new document using, we hope, the new process. Again, we're just going in as DB admin, who can simulate all these roles. And there is our new director choice, the modification we just put in the state documents. And the document was sent back to the author for modification. Now here we're going into our previous document. And as you can see, no choice was presented. So it was basically the old document using the old process. A few things to keep in mind for workflow delegation to work properly. So again, we need to create field documents for every corresponding constraint in your application. Always use fields, not roles. So here we want to use that construct, not, for example, one that uses roles. Consider using this code abstraction after you allocate users to your workflow documents, particularly in the initial state. And consider adding WA Manager role to your controls to allow DB admin to intervene if necessary. Well, that's it for this particular video. Thanks again for joining me. Please stay tuned. These enhancements will be available shortly on GitLab. And do stay tuned for our videos that'll be upcoming shortly. Thanks again for watching.